hamstringing just because I gotta go back and forth.
No, I know what it's all about. So. I'm from Shakespeare.
So did you see the article in the paper yesterday about potholes? Potholes.
Yes.
And then the gentleman who knew a lot of us on the council, just as a heads up, this is the article I'm going to be publishing.
I don't know if he knows this or not, but there's only so much you can do. Mother Nature can do what she pleases.
Indeed.
If there's a crack out there somewhere, it's going to get filled.
Oh, gavel's being passed my way because we're going to rock and roll. Okay.
We're going to talk about it during the work session and then introduce
Oh, there you are. How are you?
I am. You want to keep it with you?
You ready to rock and roll?
Okay. And then I'll put it in there.
Come on.
I prefer blues.
I prefer it heavy.
Actually, I prefer it.
Right.
That's just the committee members.
Yeah, let me keep it just so it's in front of me so I remember.
You ready to start?
Yeah.
All right.
Okay.
I'd like to call to order the Public Safety Committee meeting for tonight. Roll call.
Counselor Gibbs?
Here?
Counselor Ensel?
Here.
Mayor Reed?
Here.
Counselor Armstrong?
Here.
Counselor Kelly?
Here?
Counselor Moore?
Here.
Okay, at this time, I'd like to invite the public to make any comments. If there's anybody from the public who would like to comment on items on the public safety agenda, you can come forward now. Seeing none, we'll move on to number 2, reports from department representatives and discussion with counselors. And a report from the Parking Violations Bureau. Do we usually go over that? No, right? Okay, so we'll go to number 3. Agenda items brought forward from departments to be approved by committee and recommended to council. Number 1, request from Director of Community Development, Matthew Miller, that the pre-demolition asbestos survey contract for the former Glens Falls National Bank building and associated structures be awarded to KAS Incorporated. Payment shall be made from the parking fund. Any discussion on the item?
Yeah, I'm just curious on, is Richard, what do we have?
You're not Richard.
You wear a lot of hats, Mike, but Chamberlain's not one of them. Do we know what we have in the parking fund? What our balances?
Current balance, the last time I spoke to Richard, it was around 70,000.
That's about right.
And
The amount of the contract is going to be about 4,200.
okay. Now
We're going to carefully keep tabs of all these costs because, as you know, these are things that we believe we could get reimbursement from Financial Restructuring Board over.
From where? I'm sorry? From the
Financial Restructuring Board, because we anticipate that these acts will result in or be part of the paid parking solution. Financial Restructuring Board has already indicated to us in our report that I think you've all read that if we move towards a paid parking solution, they'd help pay for it.
Okay.
But that would, now as far as the abatement and so on, that is what we're looking at this is just a survey, but the actual abatement and so on would be paid for by the restructuring board? Is that what we're looking at? Or?
Well, we would see if they would pay as much as possible of the whole enchilada, because you can't do the abatement until you had to do the survey.
Right. No, I understand that, but I mean, I'm saying down the road, is that what we're looking at? The restructuring board paying for the abatement?
Yep. And paving and kiosks and everything else.
Okay.
But with state agencies, you never quite know until the check has arrived in the mail, but that's our strategy.
Okay, item number 2, request from Department of Public Works Superintendent Mike Brody that the mayor is authorized to sign a memorandum of agreement with Clinton County Public Transit, Clinton County Department of Planning, to establish a formal mechanism for payment by Clinton County Public Transit, CCPT, to the City of Plattsburgh, New York Department of Public Works for the removal of obsolete bus stop signs. Any discussion on the item?
They're obsolete because there's no buses?
Good question. I don't know. They approached us because they don't have a mechanism or a department to handle taking these signs down. There's a handful throughout the city. I think it's
Yeah, I think that's what came through our email, $40
Yeah.
per sign. Do we know how many signs? I'm sorry, does it
I
say?
don't have a count of the signs. I know we previously done several under prior administration, but it more than covers our cost to take out a single sign. It's basically the size of the parking sign.
That sign and stand, I presume.
Yeah, sign and post.
Okay, any other discussion on the item? Okay, we'll go to item 3. Request from Police Chief Levi Ritter for a Police Department employee to attend 2019 Annual State of New York Juvenile Police Officer Conference Training from August 26th through 30th, 2019 in Lake George, New York. The total cost will not exceed $1,619 and will be expensed out of the Asset Forfeiture Fund. I didn't have any questions on it. Is there anything you want to share about this conference?
I would.
Yeah, I'm sorry, can maybe just go through all of the conferences, Chief, if that would, because it looks like there's the request for 4, 5,
Sure.
and
This
6.
one will have the most explanation, the others are very, very brief. This training in particular deals with our juvenile officer who is.
He deals with kids, he's not a child himself.
Correct. This training is especially important because of the legislation that is going into place over the last year and this year with raising the age of infancy. So the age that you would be deemed an adult for criminal arrest is going to be 18. That's what we're phasing into to be consistent with the rest of the United States. So currently it's 17 from 16. So they're phasing it in over a 2-year period. And you can speak to this, it creates a whole new court. So it's pretty complex, and having him receive this training previously put us far ahead of the curve when it came to processing what would be considered juveniles, but are now considered a youth person. So this will be also phasing in the next stage of the raised age legislation. So very, very beneficial training for him and our department, because he will come back and educate us on what we need to do.
All right, so he'll turn around and he will train other officers.
And he's done a good job in the last year getting us ready for it being enacted. So it would only make sense to follow up that training with the second phase of it.
Okay.
The other trainings are more specific to free training that's offered. It's just the cost of getting there. So specifically the active shooter training, which is massively beneficial for officers in the department. The crisis negotiation course training is something that's more, it deals more with dealing with persons in crisis versus hostages, which it might seem like when you see the FBI in there, but this is truly how to deal with and approach a person that's in a crisis in a way that is not typically done. So, dealing with people in crisis differently than people that committed crimes. And the other is just more along the lines of the active shooter training, officer survival. With those all being out of risk, they're state, federal funded, you just have to get there. So it's a lower cost.
Okay. So number 4, request from Police Chief Levi Ritter for 2 police department employees to attend New York State Homeland Security and Emergency Services initial response to active shooters training from May 5th to 7th, 2019. And how do you say that? Oriskany, New York. The total cost will not exceed $290 and will be expensed out of the Asset Forfeiture Fund. The lodging and training will be provided by the Department of Homeland Security.
Why are they all on Oriskany? I noticed that all the last 3 are in
That's the location.
Is there like a police training center
It's
there?
a huge, huge facility.
Yeah.
It's one of the best training sites in the state
Huh.
because it's federally funded.
Makes sense.
Okay. Number 5, request from Police Chief Levi Ritter for a Police Department employee to attend New York State Homeland Security and Emergency Services FBI crisis negotiation course training from April 15th through 20th, 2019 in Oriskany, New York. Total cost will not exceed $296.25 and will be expensed out of the Asset Forfeiture Fund. The lodging and training will be provided by the Department of Homeland Security. And number 6, request from Police Chief Levi Ritter for 2 police department employees to attend New York State Homeland Security and Emergency Services Officer Survival Tactics Training from May 8th to 10th, 2019 in Oriskany, New York. The total cost will not exceed $290 and will be expensed out of the Asset Forfeiture Fund. The lodging and training will be provided by the Department of Homeland Security.
Why the $6.25 more?
The only question I have is, are the same 2 police officers going for item 4 and item 6 and staying there from the 5th through the 10th, or are you? Okay.
Different officers?
Yes.
Okay.
Is this an ongoing series of trainings sponsored by the Department of Homeland Security?
Absolutely, this is offered, so they offer it all throughout the year. It is so heavily requested that it's at least a 2-month lead time that you have to put in for, and you won't know until about 2 or 3 weeks before it opens up. So that's why sometimes we put these in advance. We might not know if the officers are actually going to be able to go, and if that's the case, then this just won't come to fruition. But these are offered, they're great training from the feedback that I've gotten from officers, but being a state-run facility, there's a lot of people to put into these. So.
Do they offer multiple, do they offer like the same types of workshops and seminars throughout the year, or are they just basically the one time per year that they do this particular type of training and then move on?
These happen numerous times.
The same one, okay, it's just,
you know, once a month, twice a month.
you're hoping to get a slot.
Yeah, we try and send officers to these because the training is so valuable, but we're kind of dependent on if they can get in. So that's why you do see these from time to time.
When we talk about the cost of these items, will you have to pay these officers, and this would probably apply to you too, Chief, would you have to pay these officers overtime while they're in attendance? And would you have to pay overtime to other officers to cover for these officers in their absence?
So I can't answer that specifically because I don't have anything in front of me. One of the things that we try to do is factor in the cost of replacement overtime, and that is something that we do scrutinize, that depending on the value. So for instance, there is none for the juvenile officer training. There's no one that's required to backfill that position. There is no service being offered while he is in attendance, but it's not like someone that's taken from a shift. So my directive is, it depends, but try and scrutinize it as heavily as possible, that to mitigate as much as you can the need for replacement overtime. As for the overtime while they are in transit and attendance, that's largely dependent on the distance that they travel, and that's a contractual thing, that while they're in attendance, they're 8 hours a day, but if it takes them 3 hours to drive there in a 40-hour week and they have 46 hours, that's the nature of the overtime for transit.
I know that's imprecise, but maybe in the future, what we should have is an estimate of those additional costs. We get a true sense of the true costs of the training.
Sure.
Because sometimes we realize that something that is free really ultimately isn't free once you take into account some of these other factors. Thank you.
Okay, item 7, request from Fire Chief Scott Lawless for 2 firefighters to attend Crewed by Rail Emergency Response Training Course, March 24th through the 30th, 2019 in Pueblo, Colorado. The New York State FEMA program covers travel, room, board, and meals. The total cost is approximately $400 to pay for travel, meals, ferry, parking, and baggage fees.
I guess I just have a question, and I'm wondering, the city would be paying the $400 for the travel fees and so on. I have no problem with that, but do we have a policy in place where there are per diems and limits similar to with state travel, where you're given a per diem X amount for breakfast, lunch, dinner per day?
Right,
Okay.
the baggage fees we put in because they have to bring their fire gear, so it may cost a
Little bit more, yeah.
Although some baggage fees are covered by this. Speaking to the overtime, it will be all my overtime and any backfill will be recovered from Adirondack Regional Hazmat Consortium, which is a 6-county consortium that has federal grant money. And all I do is take that, send them the numbers, and they will reimburse us. So there's no overtime or pay costs to the city. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Do we know what the per diem is, just offhand?
Yeah,
Depends upon where you'd go to, right? Location.
Okay.
And this is what happens if like there's a derailment and crude oil spill.
Crude oil spills, and it can work for flammable liquids also. It's the same type of techniques. They actually, I've been there, it's a national training center, and they have 4 actual train wrecks that you work on top of when they light them on fire, and you have to, there's certain techniques that you have to use so that it doesn't exponentially grow. And we have crude oil that goes through this city, right through the center every day.
Okay, any other discussion? So
I make a motion to.
Oh, go ahead.
Okay. I make a motion to move items 3.1 through 3.7 to the regular meeting agenda.
I'll second that.
Counselor Gibbs?
Yes.
Counselor Renzel?
Yes.
Mayor Reed?
Yes.
Okay. Any old business? Well, I have some old business that I'd like to bring up. We met last week while I was on vacation to talk about a number of things, and Chief Ritter, I'll start with you. I had brought up possibly looking at a DEC list for your animal control officer, and I sent a link to Beth, and I know she shared it with you, and I wondered if you'd had any, you could give us an update or any progress on that at all yet.
So, 2 things, currently we have no submissions, and 2, I have that list in preparation to send out.
Okay, so one of the things we had talked about last week was the contract language for the animal control officer. Do you remember this conversation? That currently we only handle raccoons, skunks, and possum. And Dean, you weren't part of that conversation because it sounded like it was probably going to be something that included you, that we might want to change the contract language. So I'm wondering if I could have a copy of the contract and I could see what it looked like, or how do we go about doing that? Because the DEC officer can do more than just raccoons, skunks, and possum.
Yeah, that'd be the first step to pull the contract terms. I don't have it.
No, you don't
on
have
me,
to have it now, but maybe before next week?
Yep.
Yeah, that'd be great.
So your idea is to have a DEC officer?
Yeah, why not?
Yeah, that's,
Because it's more
Pretty
than
cool.
just, currently, the animal control officer, it's typically just handling raccoons, skunks, and possum. But I went on the DEC website, and they have, by county, a list of people that they certify
They've
as being
certified
able to
too.
handle anything. If you have a bat in your house, if you've got, I don't know, a red squirrel in your attic, you know. And I thought it would be worthwhile to look into having an officer who could do more than just this, because if the contract reads only this, but you have something else,
yeah.
then the officer can't do anything, and that just doesn't make any sense to me. So, plus I
Your work.
recognized a couple of the people on the list I happened to know, so I said, why not? So, another thing that we had talked about, Chief Ritter, was foot patrols downtown, and we had a pretty good conversation about that. Would you be willing to share the conversation with the rest of the council about, well, my suggestion was to look at having foot patrols downtown as opposed to officers who are parked in vehicles, especially in certain areas of the downtown area that tend to attract more criminal behavior. And I was wondering if you wouldn't mind talking about that?
Sure. So the conversation that we had, it dealt with boiling down to making people safe.
Yes.
Making people feel safe.
Yeah, especially in
And
light
how
of
do
the
we best
DRI
do that?
project coming through and this revitalization of the downtown area and, Councilor Moore putting together this livable community and just a lot of things coming together, so.
So the one thing that I did share was that we do foot patrols at all hours of the day. Some of those are dependent on the activities that are taking place downtown, specifically on Friday and Saturday night when there are a large number of patrons downtown and there is a need for officers to be out on the streets walking amongst them. That's typically how our officers are put out there, depending on the amount of people, whether they are walking foot patrols or whether they're standing fixed posts. So I would say between 1:30 and 2:30 or 3 o'clock, they're actually standing a fixed post, which means they're standing on what we call the diamond in front of Pizza Bono in the green room, and they're just moving corner to corner and making sure that they are in the middle of that big crowd. So that deals with the crowd aspect. But what you were discussing more was people that live in the area or business owners. that-
Yeah, we're talking more up and down Brinkerhoff and Cornelius and
Sure.
Court Street, I think.
Are you talking like neighborhood watch, like deputizing citizens?
No,
No.
no, just having
police
having
officer get out
police
along the
on foot
Okay.
patrol through the center
Yeah,
city
no.
neighborhoods.
Councilor McFarland, are you interested?
Absolutely not.
And we do that with great regularity. But in having the conversation, it sounds like there's a request from persons in the public to make sure that that is being done. How to make it more visible is something that I don't know how you would actually do that. Because this person probably has never seen us do it, would naturally assume that we don't do it. And I immediately can come back and say, I know that we do it. So I guess that's the difficulty in responding to that request is, I would assure this person that we do them all hours of the day, we do building checks. We'll continue to do them because they're just good practices.
I actually just had a piece of old business too. I'm just wondering if we've had anybody show any interest in serving on the Livable Community Committee. If
5 people?
5?
Oh,
Okay.
fantastic.
And I will say that in communications with people at the college, they're going to ask, or they're requesting that Pat Rasco serve, the university police chief, serve as their representative on the committee.
Okay, I have one other thing. As part of the public safety meeting that we had, we talked about issues within the structure of Building 2 at the fire department. And I reached out to a local assemblyman and asked if there is grant funding available for such things. He said he would look into it and he would get back to me. I explained the situation and what's going on there. And so for those of you who don't know, you've got some structural issues in your building number 2. And so I thought immediately there must be grant money out there, or hopefully, maybe. So anyway, I wanted you to know that I reached out to him, and he said he would look into it and he would get back to me. So we'll see if we can locate anything. Fingers crossed, because you do need some upgrades in that building. So, and that's all I had for old business.
And since we met, as you may know, this is the time of year where we're doing all our goal setting with the various departments, and each one of the 2 chiefs and the building inspector met with me this week to outline some of the goals for the upcoming year. All of them great sets of goals, and if you all want to describe to them a little bit of some of the things you want to really identify this year. And this is, I asked them in their their proposals not to use words like continue to and et cetera, because those are ongoing things. These are the things that they've wanted to kind of get to. One, use an example, is they've got this list and they just don't have the time to get to this list, but just pick one or two things off this list they'd like to get to. So is there anything that you all would like to highlight that let the council know that you're working on, pet projects?
I guess that's me.
Pet project.
So the other thing the thing that I talked about most with the mayor was an overhaul of our departmental general orders. I think we have about 82 of them, and they encompass just about everything that you think of in operations of a police department. From how to arrest somebody, how to take them to the county jail, how to drive a police car, how to respond in such a manner. It deals with everything. But they haven't been looked at with a great deal of scrutiny since in about 10 years. And I want to make sure that we're doing what is up to speed. So an overhaul of those general orders, while a monumental task, is something that I think is very essential for the efficiency and the correctness of our police department. So that's going to be my goal for the year, one of them.
You've also got some retirements that he's trying to get well ahead of many, many months in advance to come up with a nice trajectory and transition and repositioning people and all that kind of stuff. So I know you got your hands full, as well as doing your regular job, which, by the way, I think you all noted in the paper that another major drug bust and fentanyl is coming to Plattsburgh in increasing frequency, and sure, grateful you guys are all on that.
Thank you. They do a good job.
How many retirements are you looking at? Or can you say? I'm not sure if you can say that.
So we have one that we have not replaced yet because we do not have a police academy scheduled. We'll probably schedule it for the summertime, but we'll need to replace a retiree. We had a person prior to that leave for the state police, so that's a second person. There are people though that are of retirement age though, and that's what the mayor is talking about, is having a plan for if these people, you know, would retire. For instance, we have a corporal that will probably retire over the summer. That brings about issues because we don't have a valid promotional list. So you have to provisionally appoint and wait for the person to score in the top 3. And just having a plan like that is really what he's talking about.
Okay.
And then if there are positions that are non-sworn, how do you best have a position that encompasses all the job duties that are required?
How often are those exams offered? Chief, corporal, captain, lieutenant?
Usually every 4 years. So you better score well.
Chief, in 2018, how many times was the department's SWAT team used?
Several times.
Thank you. No.
Thank you, Paulus. What are some of the things that you want to mention?
One of the goals is to research the cost measures needed to operate a second ambulance and generate a cost, revenue, and safety implications of operating the second ambulance. Be able to generate a report to the council and the mayor, laying everything out and what would need to be done in order to do that. It's going to take into a lot of variables and foresight to do it.
How about you, Bill?
A couple of things that we're looking into is establishing some new laws about vacant buildings law and the rental registration. Trying to break down the numbers right now, see what it would take to accomplish that. I'm going to work with Dean on that as well.
So
knowing-
vacant buildings and
A rental registration.
what is rental registration? What does that mean?
Residential units that are rented. Right now, there's state requirements for periodically how often they need to be done, every 3 years. Trying to come up with a way to initiate something that would allow us to do more than that.
I think this goes right hand in hand with your college city committee that you're forming. That's a big priority for them to make sure that we don't have some of the things that we saw in the news last night continue to occur. So Joe's really trying to get ahead of that in a proactive way and work with your committee on that.
Okay. Okay, anything else in old business?
There's one that's, I could probably bring up in old business because we've been dealing with this, and we will need to have a resolution tonight with your committee's approval to go to the council on, has to do with the secret process we've been working with on our property up on Ruger Street. I think you may have a copy, but let me read it out. Whereas by resolution dated January 31st, 2019, the Common Council announced its intention to serve as lead agency for a Type 1 secret review for the city's impending petition for annexation because it was best suited to complete the review. And whereas therefore the city served its notice to serve as lead agency on otherwise potentially involved parties. And whereas while several respondents indicated they had no objection to the city's intention to serve as lead agency, the town of Plattsburgh adopted a resolution on February 21, 2019, advising that it does not consent to the city's request for lead agency status and stated its intention to establish itself as lead agency in this matter. Now therefore be it resolved pursuant to 6 NYCRR 617.6B5, the Common Council authorizes and directs the Corporation Council for the city to submit a request with supporting information that a lead agency be designated by the DEC Commissioner, specifically the City of Plattsburgh, on notice of the involved agencies. So I'd ask for this to be moved to the main agenda with your approval as well.
Do I need to make a motion, or do I need to make the motion?
Yeah,
Okay.
just like any other.
Peter can.
Okay, I'll make that motion.
Second.
Mayor Reed,
Yes?
Counselor Gibbs,
Yes.
Counselor Ensel,
Yes.
Okay, so,
One other item for new business you see is the report for sidewalk shoveling appeal application. And we need to move into executive session for that
Yes.
because it involves a matter of medical condition of a particular person. Whenever
Okay.
you're ready.
all right.
That would just be the committee members.
Yep.
Can they
Okay.
join, the rest of the council join us if they wish?
If they're invited, but they wouldn't be able to vote if there is any vote or action taken
I don't
during the
either.
committee session. We also have, we had scheduled a public hearing on the proposed local law.
Oh,
If you
at
want to
5.
take a quick pause, complete that public hearing. Okay. So-
Okay.
and start till 5.
Isn't it 5?
Yeah, it's
It is
fine.
5, yeah.
Oh, sorry.
So,
All right, so, do we want to hold off on the last item for the public hearing? Okay, let's do that then.
So I'd like to call a public hearing to hear public comments on local law P2 of 2019, a local law renaming, amending, and restating in its entirety Chapter 241, Section 5 of the City Code of the City of Plattsburgh. It's not an opportunity for any members of the public to please come and be heard.
So we received one email, point one of our,
Yeah.
so we received an email by this person, by this date, you don't have to read the whole email, but then you
Yeah.
can put it as part of the record.
Okay.
So as part of the record, we did receive an email from a member of Ward 1. Their particular concern was that expanding this law to include possession of tobacco or vapor products by adults is a crime punishable by a fine of up to $250 is excessive and may disproportionately affect low-income minority and young adult people who use tobacco products.
Mhm. And also, though, I'd like that to be read because
Sure.
I dispute it.
Ostensibly, place bans on smoking are intended to protect bystanders from exposure to secondhand smoke, but with vapor and smokeless tobacco products, there's no risk to bystanders from secondhand exposure. Despite hysterical claims from anti-nicotine activists, research confirms that the primary user is the only person who experiences any suspected risk.
When's that from?
What's that research from?
It doesn't state where their sort is.
Somebody who's in the vape business.
Would you like to come forward?
I would.
Good.
Please.
Do you-
This is apropos to, do I need to?
I don't need
State your name.
Just state your name.
Jack Beaumont. I live on Oak Street. I live in a house on Oak Street. And right now, I just happened to see the article in the paper today, because the problem in my house is I have 3 people downstairs, young people, who are smoking e-cigarettes. And my tenant agreement with my landlady says that there's not to be any smoking in the house. Of course, does that apply to e-cigarettes? That's the thing you're trying to update into right now in this bill. So, and I've talked to them directly, and I got the guy to admit that he was doing it, showed me the cigarette. They said they would stop. That was like 6 weeks ago. They have. I've called my landlady. She was supposed to talk to him 2 weeks ago. She didn't. Today I called her again. She was supposed to come today, but instead she called him. See, she lives downstate now, so she can't check on them to see what they're doing. I'm the only one who can verify what they're doing. It stinks up my apartment, the vapors from it. Because I live in an old house, it comes up through the kitchen, through the pipes or whatever, it comes up, and I deal with it every day. So, I don't know what my recourse is. My landlady says I can't do anything because, unless I catch them. And I said, well, you're downstate, how are you gonna catch them? So, and I have another friend who's he asked me to ask this too. He's a realtor, but he owns buildings. And he wants to know if he has to put this in his rental agreement from now on.
This just has to do with public property.
Okay.
But he certainly could put
Outside.
it in the rental agreement.
You could put
You
it in.
could.
Sure,
And I
but
imagine your
he's
landlord could
just
update
asking,
her
you know,
rental
I'm
agreement
asking
as well.
for him.
Now, you actually notice when people are smoking
Oh, yeah,
e-cigarettes.
absolutely.
And do you notice it like right away, or is it?
Yeah, right away. Stinks up I have 2 rooms in my house that I can't smell. My bedroom, fortunately, my living room, but in the kitchen, the dining room, and then another small bedroom I have, because it's right above their bedrooms or their living room. And it just comes up.
Did your
Does
downstairs,
it linger, or is it
Yeah, it
just?
lingers.
did your downstairs neighbor indicate the frequency of which he smokes? Like, does he hit it like once and
Oh,
then
he
notice
has,
it,
yeah.
or is, are they
First,
doing it all the
I'll tell you,
time?
the first thing he said to me, I went down and I talked to him, he said, he lies. That's the first thing. I said, what, you're smoking up there? He says, no. That was something burning in the microwave. I said, come on, I know what. And he says, and then he shows it, and he pulls out the e-cigarette and shows it to me. So, it's every day. And it will, I don't know, it could be at night, during the day, whenever they're home, basically. They go to work, but when they come home at night, they smoke.
Sounds like, it would be ultimately up to your landlord to, in future rental agreements, to include
Even the,
language.
even the Clean Indoor Act doesn't cover residential properties or rentals.
I know, right?
Yeah.
I read in the paper today, the exact opposite of what you just said. You
No,
said-
it's indoor.
No, about the fumes,
Oh, yeah.
secondhand
Yeah, that's
smoke.
according to the Surgeon General.
Yeah, which
Yeah.
I think has a little more weight than wherever you guys read it. I don't know what that was.
Even though this gentleman's story doesn't go along with the local law we're proposing, it still is a very important story.
It
And that
is.
story is, yes, the vape smoke, or whatever you call it, affects people.
Right.
It affects people negatively. You're not the first person I've heard say they live above a vapor and they can smell the fumes all the time. So that is relevant, and that also explains why we shouldn't allow this in public property
Right.
as well. And so I'm glad you came forward to talk to us about your own personal situation, because it does apply to the public scene also. And another thing is to say that this type of activity doesn't have any impact on other people is simply a lie, because children who see this activity think, wow, this is really cool. These little pipes and other devices, they look cool. So the inclination among young people is to think, well, this is cool, I think I'll try it. So I don't think we want to encourage that in our public property. So I'm glad you came forward and talked to
Okay,
us
should I
about
tell my
this.
friend that you just should maybe put that in his agreement?
Yes,
Yes,
All right, thanks a lot.
thank
Thank
you.
you.
you're welcome.
I'm sorry,
Mike?
what were you saying about the Surgeon General?
Me?
No,
Michelle?
Michelle.
I said that the Surgeon General is, the report that I read you last week, and research having to do with the chemicals in vape, smoke, or whatever it's called, vapor. There are chemicals, and just for example, the flavoring has, sorry. Diacetyl, and it's linked to a lung condition called popcorn lung. There are other kinds of organic compounds, or inorganic compounds, such as nickel, tin, and lead, found in the vapor.
But does the Surgeon General dispute the allegations in the email sent from the constituent that the vapor only affects the person smoking it and not people near them?
That's included, I mean, if they're analyzing the vapor, that's necessarily going to be a secondhand smoke product. It's something that other people ingest.
Secondhand vapor.
Secondhand vapor. Yeah,
I also,
benzene found in car exhaust.
I received one comment from a constituent who, after seeing it on one of our local television stations, 5 a.m. newscast, called me.
At 5 a.m.?
6:10.
Okay.
Called me to say that approving this law was violating our constitutional rights and so on. So, just for the record, I want to mention that.
Okay, sure.
I did receive one comment about it.
Right. Well, I mean, I would just say that actually, in this particular version of the law that you have on the agenda today, it mirrors precisely what was written and passed in 2001. The possession aspect was in there. The only insertion of new language had to do with the inclusion of electronic cigarette delivery systems, or vapes, hookahs, they're listed in the agenda. I do want to take the opportunity. I had a chance to talk to a friend who's very sensitive to these kinds of secondhand agents, and she says that people don't obey the indoor Clean Air Indoor Act. I didn't say that right, but she said that people surreptitiously bring them indoors, and because they believe that they can, take a quick hit and nobody will notice the vapor, they manage to get away with it. That nobody, I mean, this even happens in restaurants and so forth. And so the argument was that even including possession might be a valuable thing, because it might discourage somebody from even bringing it out in any environment, indoor or outdoor. We're not dealing with indoor, but outdoor. I have to say, though, that I am very much appreciative of Councilor McFarland's and Councilor Moore's concern about the possession wording in this law that's on the docket tonight. And you want to address that?
The old law, the way I read it, was it only applied to people under 18. So by expanding this current law to include people over 18, then I just feel really uncomfortable.
No, it's always
prohibiting
applied
possession
to
of something.
everyone. Yep.
Well, I was just concerned.
No?
You know, somebody could go purchase something legally, like a pack of cigarettes, e-cigarette materials or whatever, and as soon as they hit the street, they become illegal, and I think we really don't want to go down that road.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if somebody's making a legal purchase to consume in an appropriate place, you know, I don't think we need to go that far. And I don't know how you would enforce that because they are legal products in the United States.
I think what we
We'll
might
get-
do
we'll
right
get a
now
public
is,
hearing.
right, we're just a public hearing at this point, so we're actually debating the merits of the,
Okay.
of the proposal. So if we could end the public hearing, is there any other members from the public like to be heard? Please come forward.
Apologize for walking in late. My name is Alex Clark. I live at 174 US Oval, Plattsburgh, New York. Fantastic. And you got my hastily written last-minute email. I apologize again for showing up late. But I did also want to, in the interest of disclosure, by day I'm the executive director of the Consumer Advocates for Smoke-Free Alternatives Association. But I'm here tonight in my capacity as a resident and just felt very passionate about this and felt it was necessary for me to show up and express my opposition personally. Not only am I concerned about this ordinance sending the wrong message about smoke-free tobacco and nicotine products and that they would discourage people who smoke from trying these products by sending the inaccurate message that they are just as harmful as combustible tobacco products. But I do have very, very strong concerns about the wording that would criminalize possession by anyone. $250 is a steep fine to pay, not just for young people, but for a lot of adults who are living paycheck to paycheck. And I think, you know, in this era where we are noticeably rethinking a failed war on drugs, it does not make much sense to open up a new arm in criminalizing tobacco or nicotine possession. So I would urge you, please, to withdraw this proposal, at the very least reconsider and removing smoke-free products. Thank you.
Any other members of the public would like to come forward during this public hearing? Seeing none, let's end the.
Oh, wait, I think we've got
Yeah, I
somebody.
just wanted to make sure Maria was coming up. Dana Bushy Isabella, Program Director for Tobacco-Free Franklin, Essex. And it's interesting, this particular proposal, because this is something that you already have on the books. And being amended to include what we see right now as one of the gravest public health issues facing our young people when it comes to nicotine addiction and the increased use of our young people. Since 2014 to 18, there was a 160% increase in youth using vaping products. And so really, a lot of the genesis of this, even that original law in 2001, the genesis really has to go to our young people. And like Mr. Kelly was saying, we're talking about public places, open public places. Is the behavior of the adults there something that is going to normalize and glamorize something like smoking or vaping that young people may decide like, hey, they're doing it, it's cool for me to do too. And so really, this is about where do we want to offer healthy places for our kids to live and our residents, families to live, work, and play. This isn't about being punitive to people. It really is about creating healthy spaces. And you're surrounded by them. The city of Plattsburgh already has, or not the city, I'm sorry, the county of Clinton County already has a tobacco-free policy, grounds policy. The town of Plattsburgh already has a tobacco-free grounds policy. So you're kind of that little missing link in a region that is already designed so that public places aren't places that promote something that could be and is very addictive for our young people. So really, you know, if I go back to the value of protecting our young people and the health also for people who are really trying to stop smoking, to be around in open public places someone who is smoking. It's an automatic trigger for them. So I think there are really kind ways to do this, and in conversations around this, this is something that we as a community should be taking up and helping support. You can look over at Trinity Church and you see right there invisible now is a big huge sign that this property is tobacco free. So it's adding signage will be one big thing, and friendly signage, not signage that is like banning. And this is about who we are as a community and what we want to offer to our people in the community. So that's kind of where I'll leave that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dan.
Any other members of the public, please come forward.
Hi, I'm Maria Lyons from Raleigh.
Bring the mic down to your mouth. Thank you.
So I, a student myself at Stafford Middle School, I walk home, and so do a lot of other students, because like you're getting older, your parents could trust you. But like when I walk home with my friends, there's like a lot of people who do smoke and secondhand smoke. It's not really good for you, and it kind of influences some of the students at my school, to where some of them actually do it at my school, and I personally think it's not okay. I kind of dislike it because it's kind of like self-harm, and it could hurt you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other members of the public? Seeing none, let's close this public hearing and resume with your meeting.
Okay.
Anything to add?
So we're on number 5, new business. We do have an appeal application that we need to go and discuss.
We do, and if you'd also entertain a very brief update on discussion on potential litigation with regard to Webb Island Bridge, so I can include the other counselors in the discussion.
Okay.
Just to clarify that motion, you would need a motion to enter to executive to discuss the medical condition of a particular person.
I'll make that motion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And Joe, would you like to join us, please? Thank you.
It probably went to the sun and then it just passes. It gets sent back. So one got sent back. It's open. I just went in there.
Can I go downstairs and finish the day business?
So we'll knock 3 times.
Yeah. Just like that would do fine.
Okay.
And that's where a lot of students go.
So you're in favor of the law banning
Yeah.
Patrick, can you stop when we walk by? Stop on the floor. That Richard knows that.
Oh, we have paperwork to sign.
Yeah.
Okay. I'll tell you something about that Henry Coon guy after the meeting. Interesting.
You're back. Okay. I'm gonna keep this. Sorry.
So returning from executive session to discuss the matter of a matter in which involving the health of a constituent, and also discussion of legal negotiations between the City of Plattsburgh and Plattsburgh School District over the Webb Island Bridge. Decisions were made on the latter, and recommendations on the former have been made. Any other issues you'd like to?
No, I have no other new business. Entertain a motion to adjourn our public safety.
So moved.
Second?
Counselor Gibbs?
Yes.
Counselor Renzel?
Yes.
Mayor Reed?
Yes.
Okay, meeting adjourned for public safety.
So let's begin the meeting of the Common Council tonight. Tonight we'll begin with the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, please.
Mayor Reed?
Present.
Counselor Armstrong?
Here.
Counselor Kelly?
Here.
Counselor Gibbs?
Here.
Counselor Renzel?
Here.
Counselor McFarland?
Here.
Counselor Moore?
Here.
We have a very full agenda tonight and dealing with some very important issues, so let's just start right in.
Resolved that the minutes of the regular meeting of the Common Council held on February 21st, 2019 are approved and placed on file among the public records of the city clerk's office.
Moved by Councilor Kelly and second by Councilor Gibbs. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passed.
Resolved that the payrolls of the various departments of the city of Plattsburgh for the week ending February 27th, 2019 in the amount of $452,747.72 are authorized and allowed, and the mayor and the city clerk are hereby empowered and directed to sign warrants drawn on the city chamberlain for the payment thereof.
Moved by Councilor Kelly, second by Councilor Ansel. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passed. You have in your packet your regular reports for the week. Would you like to augment them with any additional reports, beginning with governance strategy and city operations? Councilor Armstrong.
Yes, I'm so glad to hear that many of you will be able to attend the presentation by David Spolidato, I mispronounced his name, and OpenGov on Tuesday at 5 o'clock. I have some packets here for you that give an overview of their proposal to give us a kind of software that will enhance our capabilities in terms of budgeting, in terms of creating efficiencies, and in terms of making our budgetary process more transparent to the public. And so I'll make sure you get those. Also, I've been doing a little research through the Sustainability Committee about some governmental programs, New York State governmental programs that are available if we sign on to them. One is Climate Smart Communities, sponsored by the DEC, and the other is Clean Energy Communities, sponsored by NYSERDA. I've spoken to Jamie Rogers, who's called an energy circuit writer. Basically, he is a consultant to communities who wish to look at whether or not they want to participate in these programs. And I tried to get him to come to my committee meeting next week. He's not available. So I'm going to ask that we find time in our agenda, either committee agenda or regular meeting agenda, the following week, March 14th, and he would like to make a 10-minute presentation about these programs, basically conservation programs. Okay, and then I have a letter that Beth Carlin so nicely duplicated for me. It's by Kylie Goodell King. She is concerned about losing trees.
Yeah, it's the first I've heard of it, and it was on Lafayette, which is in my ward.
Oh, about the loss of trees?
Yeah.
Yeah, she just passed this to, her aunt, passed this to me and asked me to supply copies of the letter to you.
Do we know, was it
I think this is
MLD
something to do
that,
with the nice
MLD took down, or what,
I'm
who
not
took down the
sure.
trees?
This has come up before with the NICEAG, is when moving a lot of
Right.
trees.
Well, it was with
In the
Verizon.
city?
Verizon.
Verizon?
Yeah.
Sorry.
Could be.
But anyway, I don't really, I mean, we can discuss it at a later time. I just wanted to make sure you each received a copy of it.
Yeah, no,
Yes.
I mean, I agree with you, Rochelle, that we should discuss it, because this is something I wasn't even aware of, and I don't know if anybody else was, but does Verizon have the right to take down trees in on city property?
Yeah, they do.
They do.
We'll look into it. Thank you.
Thank you. City infrastructure, Councilor Moore?
Well, after seeing things in the paper, I just want to remind everybody that Public Works is working on potholes just at as rapid a pace as they possibly can, and I hope everyone bears with them. It's very difficult to make these patches when it's in the wintertime like this, when it's wet, but they are working on it. And I just wanted to follow up with the Chamberlain. We had talked about an insurance rider for possible volunteers for removing snow. Did we have a chance to look into that?
Yeah, if you enlist volunteers to work for the city to remove snow, we'll have to cover them under our insurance coverage, especially for workers' compensation. And of course, liability when they're on somebody's property.
Did we have any idea what that would cost us to do that?
Currently, all the volunteers that we, have working for the city for special events and so forth, they're covered. And I don't have to provide any additional listings for numbers, but if this is gonna be a significant number of people on a regular basis, say for the entire winter, I'll have to get a list and give them a number, and then they'll have to tell me if there's a rider they're gonna have to buy.
Okay, thank you. That's all I have.
And on the potholes, we are discussing with DPW some new emerging technologies to take care of it. It's obviously been a very difficult season because of the combination of snow, followed by warming, followed by ice, followed by really deep freezing, just wreaks havoc with our roads. But we're going to explore technology that will be doing hot patches on them in the future and staying ahead of that. But we certainly appreciate everybody's patience during a very, very difficult and unusual season. Thank you. Next committee is Finance and Budget. Councilor Kelly.
I'd just like to ask my fellow councilors to help me sign bills tonight. We just received them when we were in executive session. And rather than have us linger after the meeting, I'd like to pass this stack down to Jeff Moore and ask him, the three councilors on that side of the room, to sign, and we'll sign these. That'll get us out of here on time. Thank you.
Public Safety, Councilor Gibbs.
Well, we had our public safety meeting at 4:30, and items from that agenda have been moved onto our regular agenda for the public.
Thank you. Plattsburgh Public Library, Councilor Anderson.
There was a meeting Tuesday night, and unfortunately I had a conflict and I was unable to attend, so.
And I said I'd sub, and I had such close scheduling that I didn't wind up going, so I'm sorry about that, Peter.
No, that's fine, but I'm sure we'll get the minutes and.
We will.
And MLD, Board President, Councilor McFarland.
No update at this time.
It's resolved that the reports as listed are hereby ordered received, and any written reports are placed on file among the public records of the city clerk's office. Moved by Councilor Gibbs and second by Councilor Armstrong. Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passed. There's no additional correspondences or recommendations from boards at this time. Please continue.
Resolved that the bills ordered by the Common Council for the week ending March 1st, 2019, in the amount of $1,169,335, are authorized and allowed, and the mayor and the city clerk are hereby authorized and directed to sign warrants drawn on the city chamberlain for the payment thereof.
Moved by Councilor Kelly, second by Councilor Gibbs. Discussion?
Thank you.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passed. An opportunity for any members of the public to please address the council on items on the agenda tonight. There will be another public comment period for other items at the end of the meeting. Seeing none, let's continue. If you'd like to come and address the council, please.
I don't know if I need to address the council, but I heard on the news tonight, there was a meeting about the Bitcoin situation here in the city.
That's correct, it's on the agenda.
It's on the agenda, yeah.
But didn't you just say you were finished with the agenda?
No.
Please come forward and.
If you'd like to discuss
If
any
you'd like to
items on the
discuss it.
agenda, now's the time.
Thank you. I just was wondering.
If you'd like to please come to the podium because we're on the internet right now, sorry about that.
I just wondered why it's being considered, and they have been using our power, which I believe has elevated the cost of the residents' power here, and I just wondered why. We had excess power when they came here, was my understanding. They used all that up, and you had to go on, or whatever you call it, to buy new power, which was higher than what we had before. And so now, all the city residents have to take part and pay that extra cost, and I'm wondering why it was decided to do it that way.
To clarify, the day that the council imposed a moratorium to prevent any further Bitcoin operators to come to town till we resolved a number of issues, we had also petitioned the Public Service Commission in Albany to adjust the rate structure for the city to protect city households. This was back in March or April of 2018, after seeing the bills that were occurring last winter. They then passed a Rider A at our request, which requires any overages of purchasing extra power at higher cost to instead be being spread amongst all the ratepayers in the city. That industry has to pay for all those overages, all on their lonesome now. Once in a while, we'll still go over the limit in a very cold winter day, even if it weren't for the Bitcoin operators. So once in a while, there is a small increase, but no longer is it the case based on the Albany rulings that they've put in place that we're sharing those costs.
Why should we be charged for it in the beginning?
We shouldn't.
No.
And
That's
why
why
can't we change that now?
we have.
Okay, so that's included.
We're not permitted, the city's not permitted to make those changes. We had to go to Albany, ask them to make the changes on our rate structure. They have to approve it. So they passed their Rider A the same day that we imposed the moratorium. So that is in place since April of 2018.
Thank you.
Thank you. It's very, very important to clarify, so I'm glad you brought that up.
Thank you.
Any other public comment at this time? Seeing none, let's please proceed.
Motion to remove item 7A from the table.
Moved by Councilor Kelly, second by Councilor Gibbs. All in favor of removing from the table?
Aye.
Aye.
A roll call, I better take a roll call.
Counselor Armstrong?
Yes.
Counselor Kelly?
Yes.
Counselor Gibbs?
Yes.
Counselor Ensel?
No.
Counselor McFarland?
Yes.
Counselor Moore?
Yes.
So at this time, we have back on the table discussion of the lifting the moratorium itself. We've had a lot of discussion. I think that some of your concerns included whether the noise issue has been properly dealt with in either this or in the code you passed a number of months ago, or in a noise ordinance that I think you may be presenting tonight. And now is the time to have more full discussion. Councilor Hansel?
Yeah, I have just a question, and I don't know if Mr. Tracy is here. In looking at our weekly expenditure analysis that we are given this week, just tonight, I see where in January to the New York Power Authority, we had to pay $699,322 for electricity that was purchased for resale. I'm just wondering, of that amount, how much of it is being billed back to the cryptocurrency?
Based on his discussion, I think a week or two ago, he said that because of the unusually cold weather patterns we had in December or January, can't recall which he was referring to, that there was a small excess charge on the ratepayers of something less than 1 cent per kilowatt hour, but the bulk of the overages were paid by the industry to the tune of something like 4 cents per kilowatt hour, if I recall. So they did properly partition the rider A to make sure that any overages caused by that industry are borne entirely by that industry.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, with the 1 kilowatt hour and the 4 kilowatt hour, I'd be interested in seeing what the breakdown was as far as money in real dollars of that essentially $700,000.
I don't think Bill's with us. Would
No,
you
he's
know
not,
anything?
but I don't think I understand the question. I was trying to say, of the $699,000 that we paid for electricity, that's the power bill the city got to resell the electricity to the customers. You wanna know how?
Was that how much of that was overage?
You mean excess?
Excess that we had to purchase.
104 megawatt usage, I have to see.
And what the
What are you
price-
getting at
what-
there?
I'm just wondering what the price was.
Well, okay, but, and are you also suggesting that we might not have had the overage at all, had it not been for the power sucked up by cryptocurrency?
No, I'm just.
Okay,
I'm
I just wondered.
I'm not trying to, I'm curious as to, of that 700,000.
Well, I'm only saying that because I kind of, that's a conclusion
I'm
I'm making.
wondering what that figure is in relation to what it usually is.
$700,000 for a month of power in the month of January is not a lot of money.
Right.
That's pretty typical.
But Bill
So,
has the allocation as to what was our megawattage of 104 megawatt usage and what was over that. And of course, he needs that to include the excess costs and purchase price adjustment code that goes into everybody's electric bill, which will take place in the next month after he does the calculations for January. And like the mayor said, the purchase price adjustment cost has been running about 0.0017 cents for normal users and 4 cents for cryptocurrency users. But he's got the allocation of that. I don't get to see that.
Thank you.
And I don't have the allocations for this January, but I do note that a lot of the overage, we typically do get overages in the winter months, January, February.
I agree.
That's because a lot of the residential usage goes up. I can tell you in October 2018, we used about 7.2 million kilowatt hours in residential usage. In November, it almost doubled to 13.5 million kilowatt hours. In December, it was 20.2 kilowatt hours, so almost doubled again. In January of 2018, I don't have the numbers for 2019, we used 28.7 million kilowatt hours. So our residential usage goes up quite a bit because we use electric heating.
Yeah, no, that makes sense.
Meanwhile, industrial usage actually goes down a little in the winter. It stays about 22 million throughout the year. In November and December, it dropped down to 21.7 million. But that doesn't really jive with what people have been talking about with their electric bills increasing from what they have been in prior years. Of course, their electric bills increase quite a bit in the winter months as opposed to the summer months. If you remember last week, it was discussed of the New York State RecSec charges to MLD customers. I can tell you that in 2018, these are the nuclear power. In 2018, that cost the city or MLD customers $1.75 million.
And there's another one on the way.
Yeah, they come every month. So in
with windows.
Probably
Long
too,
Island.
yeah. So in January of last year, of 2018, the total amount that those cost the MLD payers was $209,454. In February, it dropped down to $168,000. And the lowest it ever got was in July in June at $106,000. Back in December, it was up to $192,000. So that is actually a big cost that our customers haven't been experiencing in prior years, at least to the extent. So I do have a feeling that a lot of people's increased bills this year as compared to last year, as compared to prior years, might be in regards to that RecSec charge. And if you look at your...
Explain that just a little bit, especially for the citizen that just came forward. Just a tiny bit.
To get a more in-depth, I would watch the YouTube of last week when Bill was talking, because Bill knows way more about this than I do.
But it's a nuclear surcharge, and
it's
we're
a nuclear
basically
surcharge.
subsidizing the nuclear industry.
Yes, and that's from the state. That's from the governor's office. It's to subsidize the nuclear industry. He didn't want to shut down nuclear plants. So it's being dispersed through all MLDs throughout the state. And if you look at your electric bill, forgot to bring mine today, but you can see that you have your regular charges at the residential rate. You're being charged about 4.5 cents per kilowatt hour. And then you'll see what's called a PPAC, which is an extra charge per every kilowatt hour you use. And that's where Rider A takes effect. And then you'll also see the RecSec charges, the REC and ZEC charges. You can see that right on your electric bill, what gets put to them. So I would recommend that you look at your, if you keep last year's bills, take a look at that and see if it's really because of the PPAC, which is the increase due to over electric usage, or the ZEC or REC. I will note that Rider A works such as this, as Bill pointed out. If we go over power, typically if...
Over quota?
Yeah, and this was, if we go over the quota, the way it was put forth is that everyone's PPAC without Rider A in effect would have been about 1 extra cent per kilowatt hour. So, if you use however many kilowatt hours in your house, you're being charged 1 cent more for every kilowatt hour. With Rider A, the way it works is that the high density load cryptocurrency units would be charged about 2.6 cents per kilowatt hour instead of 0.7, and residential users would be charged 0.7. When I looked at my electric bill in June, I believe it was, your PPAC tends to be about 0.6, 0.7 cents per kilowatt hour anyways, and you'll see it last all year. So by having a 0.76 PPAC per kilowatt hour, your electric bill really is increasing because of cryptocurrency overuse. Meanwhile, the cryptocurrencies, if their electric bill is increasing by 2.6 cents per kilowatt hour, the industrial rate for the city's electric use is about 2.6 cents per kilowatt hour, so their electric rate is effectively doubling. And Bill was talking even last week, and these are the numbers I'm taking from last month's MLD board meeting. Bill was saying that the Rider A being put forth last week was, I think he was saying 4.6 cents.
He said 4 cents.
4 cents.
Yeah.
So 4 cents per kilowatt hour is increasing. If you're in the industrial zone and you're a cryptocurrency miner, that means your electric rate is more than doubling. If you're in the commercial zone, which is also 4.5 cents per kilowatt hour, your electric rate is almost doubling. But for regular for regular users, residential users, at 0.7 cents per kilowatt hour, you really are only being charged for the overage that that you would probably be charged for anyways when we normally go over the quota. Because as I said, 0.6, 0.7, that's around the rate we actually get. 0.6 is what we get throughout the summer months, and 0.7 is pretty reasonable for the winter months. So I don't think our overages so far this year can be attributed to cryptocurrency and the overages caused by that. We haven't had any new cryptocurrency miners come in. We do have 2 cryptocurrency miners that would fall under the moratorium that were there before the moratorium was issued. One uses a little over 10 megawatts of power. I think the other one's considerably less. If more come in, then they will use up electricity, but we do hope that the legislation we enacted in October should maintain the safety, health, and stability of the city and our residents. But we also think that Rider A should be a buttress effect against rising rates. That doesn't mean your rates can't rise for other reasons because of the ZEC charges or the REC charges.
But the overage isn't happening because of the crypto mine.
That seems to be the case,
Okay.
yeah.
Because I think
If
that's what.
PPAC is saying
That's
at
the
about
bottom line.
0.7.
That's the bottom line that people are concerned about. They're concerned about the 2 things: what's happening with their electric, and then what's going to happen with the noise. So Councilor Moore has updated an already existing noise ordinance law. You're prepared to tonight. You're prepared to present that so that it can be voted on in a couple of weeks.
Yes, we'll have to have a public hearing, but it does clear up that issue considerably, yes.
Now, overages, there are other concerns with increased energy use. For one, it could, if a bunch of cryptocurrency miners come in, it could use all our reserve energy even in the summer months, in which case we wouldn't have that reserve energy to market to potential new industries coming in. The other concern that cryptocurrency miners cause, and that can be easily shown by the industrial rate usage staying at about 22 million kilowatt hours used per month, whether it's in the fall or the winter months, is that cryptocurrency miners typically use the maximum amount of electricity, and they're pretty current, which is out of the norm for the way most people use electricity. Right now, I expect my house is not using very much electricity unless I left some lights on. Clearly, I left some heat on. And you go through peaks and troughs of electric use. Cryptocurrency miners typically will have them on 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, which means that the infrastructure providing electricity to that facility is at peak all the time. And that could wear out wires, it could wear out other infrastructure that really wasn't designed to handle a steady stream of high energy constantly throughout all hours of the day, all days of the year, because they're usually set up for peaks and troughs. So those are some concerns, but I know the mayor's talked about he doesn't expect a big influx of cryptocurrency miner operations, even if we do lift the moratorium. The moratorium is definitely going to have to be lifted at some point. It ends in 18 months. But my position there is the moratorium was entered for the health and safety of our residents and our citizens. We really don't have the authority that's handled by the state of regulating for ratepayers, and hopefully Rider A protects our ratepayers.
Or regulating business in general.
I think there will be a tendency among the public to say tomorrow morning when they read this in the paper, if we were to lift the moratorium, there would be a tendency to say, well, look, the next time they get a bill, those city councilors lifted the moratorium and look what happened. Well, we could have a tremendous amount of cold weather between now and the next time our residents get their bills. So it's very, very important for residents to understand that you may have overusage charges regardless of what happens with cryptocurrency. And I think you explained that very well and in great detail,
Thank you.
Patrick. But it is very important
You're almost as
to
good
know
as
that
Bill.
just because cryptocurrency miners are being charged a larger fee does not mean that residents won't also from time to time receive larger utility bills also. This does not make that problem go away. As long as we are limited in the amount of power that we can buy from the New York Power Authority, then the problem of having to go out on the open market and buy additional power during really cold periods, typically January and February, will continue to be there. So it's very important that we understand that everybody understands that cryptocurrency mining has nothing to do with cold weather. They're not really related. So.
And I should add too that this moratorium has nothing to do with the couple of very large existing Bitcoin operators. It only applied to new operators coming to town, unfortunately. But that's the reality. If you can't grandfather in entities that came in well before almost any of you were counselors, actually. So, and the other thing I want to add to the discussion too is that in the code section that you did apply, there is that novel feature that any future cryptocurrency operators have to come in and regenerate their heat, not waste their heat. So it doesn't add that additional burden onto a system that primarily uses electricity to generate heat. So we believe that should be the deterrent that will stop future operators from coming in, and we hope that other municipalities adopt that as well, because this is 2019. We need to be more conscious of our electric energy usage and use it in a much more responsible way, so that Plattsburgh is actually leading the world in imposing that kind of standard in heat industry like this. But we should also always remain vigilant on rider rate and make sure it's working as intended to protect the ratepayers. We need to monitor that. If there are tweaks that we need to do in that, I'm sure the Public Service Commission should be receptive. And I think at least one of you raised another issue. We need to be conscious of the amount of extra capacity we have in the city. And I had a discussion with Mr. Tracy and a number of you today. We need to move on with our Plattsburgh energy plan, figure out ways for all of us to conserve, figure out ways for us to avoid ever going over that limit. If it means encouraging people to better insulate their homes, or provide incentives in our building inspection or building approval process to encourage more use of things like heat pumps or other energy saving devices, we need to consider that as a council, because energy is always going to continue to get more expensive over time. And I believe this is the single most important natural resource that our city has to market. We have to use it as carefully as we possibly can. Any further discussion? Any concerns about how this decision on the moratorium interrelates with the noise ordinance? I know that has been an issue in the past.
Well, it's my understanding that the noise ordinance there's no grandfathering on that. That applies to everyone in the city, right?
Mm-hmm. Correct.
It will apply.
Any further discussion? Prepared for a roll call vote?
Counselor Armstrong?
Yes.
Counselor Kelly?
Yes.
Counselor Gibbs?
Yes.
Counselor Ensel?
No.
Counselor McFarland?
Yes.
Counselor Moore?
Yes.
It's adopted. Adoption of local law B2 of 2019, a local law renaming, amending, and restating in its entirety Chapter 241, Section 5 of the City Code of the City of Plattsburgh, be enacted by the Common Council of the City of Plattsburgh as follows. Regulating
I'll make a motion to waive the reading and move to resolution.
Councilor McFarland, second by Councilor Ensel. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Discussion of the item itself.
We started discussing this a little in the public hearing, and we did hear from 4 members of the public. And there seems to be 2 issues. One is the prohibition on possession, and I've made it clear to the council and make it clear to the audience that I won't vote for any local law that prohibits possession, especially amongst adults, just because that's a very slippery slope to get by. I don't think we really should have the power to prohibit people from possessing something that is legal. Prohibiting use on public land, that's a completely different story and something I can certainly get behind. The other issue that seems to be debated is whether e-cigarettes or vapor cigarettes, or vaping devices rather, harm second-hand users, as smoking has been proved to do. There seems to be some debate on that, and clearly people have different views on that, so I'll leave that to further discussion. But I do think that I can't vote for anything that prohibits possession by adults.
I do appreciate that input. You passed that along to us last week through email and through discussion, electronic discussion and discussion with tobacco-free New York, Essex County, Franklin County, Clinton County, whatever, all of those counties. I'm willing to amend this law, and I would like to make a proposal right now. If you look at your law in section 2, I would like to strike or possess. And in section 4, I would like to strike $250 fine and adjust that to $100. So I make that motion for amendment, and I'd appreciate a second. Thank you.
Moved by Councilor Armstrong, second by Councilor McFarland. All in favor of the amendment?
Aye.
Roll call.
Okay.
Counselor Armstrong?
Yes.
Counselor Kelly?
Yes.
Counselor Gibbs?
Yes.
Counselor Insel?
Yes.
Counselor McFarland?
Yes.
Counselor Moore?
Yes.
Okay.
So in light of that amendment, that's a substantive change of this proposed local law, so that will require another public hearing announcement and notice to the public about that public hearing. We can take it up again at that time.
Yes, that will occur Thursday, March 14th at 5 p.m. And, concerning whatever questions that remain about the nature of secondhand smoke that is a result of vaping, I believe that we can all get our facts in order. And there is an additional consideration that I think I really appreciate Dana Isabella making, and that is simply the modeling that comes from that practice by adults or minors.
So we need a motion to table this until March?
No, it's just a public hearing.
Okay, so I'll set a public hearing for Thursday, March 14th, 2019 at 5 p.m. to discuss local law 2A for the year 2019.
Thank you.
I'll just suggest anyone that wants to take part of, especially that debate, that I and Councilor Armstrong pointed out, that they should show up for the public hearing on March 14th.
Yes.
Thank you. Item C.
Resolved in accordance with the request, therefore, the common council approves that the pre-demolition of
I would like to make
asbestos
a
survey-
motion to waive the reading and move to resolution for item C, D, 8A, 8B, 8C, 8D, and 8E, because those were all discussed.
We
And I
also
do,
had the other resolution that was added on the seeker.
And the secret resolution?
Didn't make the physical agenda, that was during the committee session.
that's right.
Would you like to include that in?
Yes, please.
Moved by Councilor Gibbs, second by Councilor Moore. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Discussion of the,
He's
both by
opposed.
Councilor McFarland. Discussion of the items themselves.
Regarding the, trying to find it you. Resolution C. I know in our meeting we had discussed it. This is just for the survey to look at the potential for asbestos in the structure, and I think we got an estimate of $4,200 for the survey. And that there looks like there is ample enough money in the parking fund. I think the Chamberlain estimated about $70,000 is available in the parking fund. But the big thing is that the abatement, if there is asbestos found, the abatement would not be coming out of the parking fund. We're hoping that there would be money from the Financial Restructuring Board to take care of the abatement.
That's our intention. Any other further discussion or comment? Seeing none, roll call.
Counselor Armstrong?
Yes.
Counselor Kelly?
Yes.
Counselor Gibbs?
Yes.
Counselor Ensel?
Yes.
Counselor McFarland?
Yes.
Counselor Moore?
Yes.
Are there any other items, resolutions for initial consideration at this time? Any new business or additional council reports?
I have one item under new business. I'd like to introduce the amending, renaming, and restating Chapter 206 noise of the city code of the city of Plattsburgh, local law 53. And I would like to set a time for public hearing.
I'd like to set a public hearing for Thursday, March 14th, 2019 at 5:01 p.m. to have a public hearing on local law P3 of 2019, and each of you should have had a copy distributed to you. Thank you. Any other new business or council reports? This time we'd like to ask the public to please come and address the council on any issues of mutual concern.
So as most of you know, my name is Jamie Schwartz. I'm the Vice President of Plattsburgh Professional Firefighters, Local 2421. Thank you for taking the time to review this information. There is an available grant, 2018 Staffing for Adequate Fire and Emergency Response Grant, also known as SAFER. As you all are aware, our city is challenged with tough financial times. Through hard work and some difficult decisions, progress is being made. At numerous meetings, we have seen the amount of work required when making sure the budget and the general funds all stay in the black. Statements like, if we stay on course, we will see a significant improvement over the next few years, inspire our desire to bring this to your attention, an available way to continue to see the effects of your fiscal hard work, as well as the possible funding of a few more firefighters, in turn enhancing the services provided by our fire department. This opportunity is called the SAFER Grant. The grant provides the following. Over 3 years, the grant will cover The first year, the grant will cover 75% of a first-year firefighter's salary and benefits. I have been told by our chief that if you want to look at how much a new firefighter would cost, you have to take your base salary and double it for quick numbers. If you use that equation for rough numbers, this grant would provide roughly $51,000 per firefighter for the first year. The grant will cover 75% of a first-year firefighter's salary in the second year as well. This number would be roughly the same as the year before, $51,000. The grant will cover 35% of a first-year firefighter's salary in the third year. That would give the city about $24,000 toward the same individual. After the third year, the period of performance expires and there are no more requirements that the municipality must adhere to. These are all rough numbers. I'm a firefighter, not an accountant. I guess that's what I'm trying to say here is I think this is a great opportunity for the city of Plattsburgh to get help in funding positions that the city fire department desperately needs. The goal of the FEMA grant is to assist the fire departments who are not already NFPA 1710 compliant. And getting to that point, I have spoken at these meetings many times about NFPA 1710. NFPA 1710 is the industry standard for career fire departments in the United States. Some of the standards that 1710 set are standards on response time as well as company staffing. 1710 requires that all engine companies arrive on an initial alarm with 4 firefighters on an engine and 4 firefighters on a ladder truck. We currently respond with 4 firefighters on 1 engine when the ambulance is not out on another call. We have 3 on our second engine and 1 to 2 on our ladder truck. These are all our best case scenario, meaning nobody is off on vacation, sick, out of work, or on a short staffed shift. Most of the time we're at 2 on our Station 1 engine because the ambulance is on another call, 2 on our Station 2 engine, and nobody on our ladder truck. In just the month of February, we had 6 firefighters on duty 25% of the time. We had 7 firefighters on duty 53.5% of the time. We had 8 firefighters on duty 21.5% of the time. We did not ever have our full staffing of 9 on duty. So to break it down, our ladder truck was only staffed 21.5% of the time with only 1 firefighter. Though these numbers were only for 1 month, this is pretty typical of a normal winter month for us. I can go on about our manpower for a long time. However, the number I'm most concerned with and where I feel this grant will help is the percentage of times that we actually met NFPA 1710. That number is 0. We're not required to apply for all the personnel we need to make ourselves 1710 compliant. We just have to show that we're working to try to make that possible. Obviously, the number of firefighters arriving on an initial first alarm assignment makes or breaks an incident. When lives are at risk, there's no time to wait for off-duty personnel to be recalled or neighboring town fire departments to get to their fire stations and respond to our location. We were all able to witness this recently, how fast a fire can take somebody's life. Let's provide our citizens with the best possible chance of survival in the unfortunate event of a tragedy. What I have in front of you is a quick breakdown of what NFPA 1710 requires. I also have the notice of funding opportunity that specifically outlines the grant and the exact requirements. I would urge the Common Council to jump on this opportunity to apply to receive this grant. The application period for this grant started on February 15th and will close on March 22nd at 5 p.m. FEMA has $350 million to award, and they are projecting awarding it approximately 300 departments. This grant is an annual grant that opens roughly the same time each year. That means we can apply each year and potentially keep the costs of newly hired firefighters at a minimum for the taxpayer. It will help save the taxpayers money. Everybody that applies has a chance to receive this award. I will volunteer my time, and I've had a couple other people also want to volunteer their time if this is something you all agree to assist whatever way possible. I also have on there an actual website where you can look up more information, and there's another page I put in there that shows different cost-saving stuff with rough numbers we did. So again, if you have any questions, Mayor, if you want to let me know or the Chief know, we can definitely work on this.
Thanks, Jim.
Thank you all.
Any other individuals like to please come up and address the council? Seeing none, do I have a motion to adjourn? Moved by Councilor Gibbs, second by Councilor Moore. Roll call.
Councilor Armstrong?
Yes.
Councilor Kelly?
Yes.
Councilor Gibbs?
Yes.
Councilor Etzel?
Yes.
Councilor McFarland?
Yes.
Councilor Moore?
Yes.
Thank you all for coming tonight.
Yes. Oh, God. It's just a hot mess everywhere. Thank you. Okay. I will, I'll text Jeff and I'll let you know about Saturday.
Okay.
I want to get out of here. See my boy tonight.
How do you do in soccer? Does he like it?
He's having a great time. It's absolutely
Oh, Ben,
terrible.
you're so good.
He doesn't like contact. He's not, you know what I mean? He's not aggressive. He wants to be there because it's fun, but it's not the sport that suits his personality. But, you know, he wants to play, so I'm like, just go ahead.
One of my kids is very athletic.
I'm still not used to
very successful in any sport he ever tried. One of them was like, sounds like